On today's episode of the Football Fellowship podcast, with no Premier League action this weekend, instead we'll be taking a look at football news from around the world for the past week. We'll be doing a deep dive into the international football break, looking mainly at England's 2-0 win over Ireland and who may be replacing Gareth Southgate in that dugout permanently. We'll also be having a retrospective look at the transfer window, seeing who's done the best business and who has fallen short, as well as looking forward to the fixtures to come next weekend in the Premier League, the highlight fixture of that being the North London derby as Spurs host Arsenal. In the middle of the episode, as always, as we always say, more rounds of the quiz, the Football Fellowship quiz, and some more rounds of Guess the Club for you to play along at home as well.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us during the international break. I hope some of you are watching as listening from somewhere very warm, because it is the complete opposite in England at the moment. However, it was England who went away to Ireland to play them and won 2-0 at the Aviva Stadium in Dublin. And I tell you what, Tobes, normally 3 games into the Premier League season, to get this international break is a little bit annoying because it seems to break a momentum, and just as you're excited for the Premier League to come back, all of a sudden you got these internationals. However, with it now being the first game of the post-Gareth Southgate era, I was quite excited to see England play, and I'll tell you what, it seemed, judging by social media, that a lot of other people were as well.
Yeah, I think with these international breaks, when it's not obviously a major tournament and it is just Nations League or friendlies or qualifiers, it's quite difficult, I think, being English, that a lot of the games doesn't really feel like there's too much to play for. It feels like we're qualifying the way that it's going to set up now. We're going to qualify every time, and the Nations League is, I suppose, to put it bluntly, a bit of a glorified friendly. But I think, as you said, in this game in particular, with it being Lee Carsely's first game, the first game with Gareth Southgate not sat in the dugout, it was good to see. And a lot of people, I think, wanted to see how we were going to line up, how we were going to play. Was there going to be much change? And obviously, with a few of the young lads that Carsley's picked into the squad, if they'll be making that starting 11, if they'll be making impact off the bench, and yeah, just seeing, I guess, what has changed since last time.
Yeah, and for those of you who didn't watch the game, I should probably just read out the lineup for England. It was Pickford in goal, a back four, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Mark Gay, Harry Maguire, Levi Colwill, a midfield 3 of Declan Rice, Kobbie Mainoo, Jack Grealish, and a front 3 of Bukayo Saka, Harry Kane, and Anthony Gordon as well. And so from my perspective, I think going into this game and going into the post-Gareth Southgate era, regardless of who the manager is, and we'll come on to Lee Carsely as well, I think I just wanted to see the shackles come off this England squad a little bit. I think we all saw that, the players that were coming up, that the world-class nature of them, like the Trent Alexander-Arnold, Declan Rice, Harry Kane, Bukayo Saka, and so many more. Now, we wanted to see a bit more free-flowing football and a bit more attacking football, not being the underdogs anymore, really taking games to the opposition. And this isn't coming from a position of, oh, we're better than the other teams. No, because there are actually a lot of good international sides out there that have done really well in the last few years. I think it comes from the fact that we've seen these talents do so well at club level that we want to see them replicate their form for country as well now. And I think it's fair to say, correct me if I'm wrong, Toby, that we got a glimpse of that against Ireland.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think having Grealish, I suppose, playing in that left-sided 8, you imagine it'd probably be someone like Bellingham there, which, and having Mainoo sort of as central as a 6 and Rice as an 8 on the right-hand side, as opposed to having a double pivot of maybe Mainoo and Rice and Grealish / what will probably be Bellingham as a pure 10, I think was a good change and a positive change. And I think a lot of teams these days do play 4-3-3. We saw that with Spain, who did go on to win the Euros last time round. They were able to play a very attacking, very free-flowing 4-3-3. And I think that maybe goes against the trend and the old saying that international football was different and that you do have to play a little bit more defensive. And I think with that tide changing, it was positive to see in this game that there were tweaks, I think, as you said, to get those shackles off a little bit. And in that first half especially, we looked really good and looked really positive, and that was good to see.
Yeah, absolutely was. And just on that about international football changing, I think everything in football comes in waves, So I think when Gareth Southgate did really well, it was very much the following, I think, the France model of, you sit back defensively and you be compact and you win a game 2 or 1-0 and you make sure you don't concede first. But I think as that wave has changed, I don't think Gareth Southgate and that England squad changed with it. And I think now we're looking more towards that and trying to jump on the bandwagon as well, because we undoubtedly have the players. And yeah, one person that, really impressed me was Trent Alexander-Arnold. I mean, I'll be biased. I'm a Liverpool fan. But I just think that this is a talented player who is arguably the best in the world in this position on the ball. Defensively, obviously, yes, there are question marks, but I do think it's a little bit of a tired rhetoric used at him, and I do think that he is better defensively than a lot of people give him credit for. But I think just for that first goal, the ball he plays behind the centre backs to Anthony Gordon to really set him on one-on-one with the goalkeeper, I just think we saw Kyle Walker at the Euros, and he is, one of the best right backs to ever play the game, arguably the best Premier League right back of all time. But I just think that on the ball, he was a little bit deficient. And finally, you get Trent Alexander-Arnold in the team. You get him into a position that we all know he can do really well in and excel in. And I think it really goes to show. And I think players in their position, as simple as that sounds, but I think that's one thing that I really, really liked.
Yeah, and I think in the Euros, I'm pretty sure you were as well, calling for Trent to be played in the midfield because we knew that Kyle Walker was going to be playing right back and that he was really important to how England defended. Whereas I think in this game, you could really see Carsely set up the side, I think, to allow a lot of different players to flourish and to sort of bring out their strengths. Where you've got Trent on that right-hand side, who's given a lot of freedom, is able to drift inwards, drift forward, knowing that he's got Rice ahead of him as a right-sided 8, I think provides good cover. You've got Gahey playing on that defensive line, who's fairly quicker than, I suppose, if you had Maguire and Stones, a little bit more pace in there just to cover. And you've also got Levi Colwill playing left back, which I think shows that when Trent is drifting forward, drifting inside, you've got a makeshift back 3 there, which I think provides more than enough cover and allows Trent to play where he's more comfortable, to play where he plays best, where he plays for Liverpool. And it maybe didn't work in playing centre mid, but I think giving him that freedom at right back really, really showed in this game, as you said. And the same with Colwill on the other side, being someone who's going to be a little bit more conservative, having someone who's going to be a lot more attacking compared to Rice in front of him in terms of Grealish, who was playing as an 8, but again, drifting into those number 10 positions, drifting out to the left to join Gordon when needed as well. So it was a really sensible setup, but sensible in the fact that it allowed our attacking players to thrive too. So I think, yeah, it was good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I talked about it for the first goal, but the second goal as well was just, it was so well worked, wasn't it, mate? The fact that you had Declan Rice playing 1-2s on the right-hand side, he had a ball into the box, and obviously the two former Irishmen in Declan Rice and Jack Grealish getting the goals. Both, I'd say Rice definitely more than Grealish, muted celebration considering the fact that, yes, they decided to play for England for the senior men's national side, but I don't think they have anything against Ireland, and I think it was going to be the story of the game, how well they did, and of course they ended up getting the 2 goals.
Yeah, as we saw so many times throughout the weekend, it just had to be them, and it was surprising to see Grealish play. Actually, I think he was the player in the squad who was fit enough, who sort of fitted that position most naturally. But when I first saw the lineup, and Grealish as sort of the left-sided central midfielder, I thought it feels like he's just being played because of the game, and it was like written that he was going to score.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did think to myself, maybe looking slightly a bit further ahead, that, Grealish in that role on the left-hand side, giving the license to be attacking because of the fact that, no offence to Ireland, the opposition weren't the strongest. I wonder if that position was set up for maybe the likes of a Cole Palmer, maybe the likes of Phil Foden, who both unfortunately had to pull out of the squad. Whether they're injured or not for the first game back of the club out in that respect, let's wait and see on that. But yeah, I do think that it's quite interesting, and I think there's definitely going to be a lot of competition in that position on the left-hand side of the 3, if that's what Lee Carsely or the future manager would decide to go with. That, getting the best out of, some of the more flair players, because obviously Foden getting shoehorned out to the left-hand side was never going to work, but at the same time, you can understand people's arguments that he has to play because he's just supremely talented. So that position is really interesting. But then also, you can just put Jack Grealish out on the left-hand side. So there's a lot of options going forward, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, especially, like you've said, with those players like Foden and Grealish, they're less so sort of pure wingers compared to Anthony Gordon. And I think when you are playing a 4-3-3, and it's not going to be similar to Pep's system, where there's so much movement sort of positionally, that I do think maybe they would suit sort of a central midfield left-sided 8 role compared to a winger like someone like Anthony Gordon, where you know if you can get the ball to him, he's going to try and beat a man. Whereas I think with Grealish and Foden, it's more sort of about cutting back inside, as you said, playing 1-2s and trying to find space elsewhere. So yeah, it's a nice option to have, definitely, especially with the players we've got in the squad.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to shout out so many of these England players, but one final one I'd probably say is Anthony Gordon. I think during the Euros, everyone was screaming out for Gareth Southgate to not play Phil Foden on the left-hand side, bring in Gordon, play an actual left winger mixing up my words, an actual left winger at left wing, and Anthony Gordon is exactly that. I think when Harry Kane was dropping in deep to try and pick up the ball, I had no problems with it whatsoever because Anthony Gordon was going in behind, stretching the opposition defence, and that's exactly what we were missing as well. So I think everything that possibly could have gone well did go well. You had some debuts off the bench as well. Let's explore the other side of it, and let's play devil's advocate, Toby. Everything that we've said and everything that we've said is positive. Is what everyone's been saying. It's what everyone was saying during the Euros when Gareth Southgate was in charge. So how much credit do we give Lee Carsely for this one?
Yeah, I think he deserves a good amount of credit. I don't think we can take one result and one sort of lineup too overboard, because Ireland are a much smaller country sort of in terms of population, in terms of rankings in FIFA, that this should have been a fairly comfortable win, and as comfortable as it was. But yeah, to get 3 points and to line up as they did, I think was a good sign. And I think it's definitely done Lee Carsely some favours in terms of potentially being the next permanent England manager, which I guess is one that we definitely should discuss now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you what, I've been quite outspoken about who I think the England manager should be. I think looking at the candidates, I mean, you've got two routes, obviously. You've got the English route and you've got the foreign manager route. And let's explore the English one, because I think that if you're picking the best English manager out there, that it should probably be Eddie Howe. I think looking at the candidates, you've got Eddie Howe, you've got Graham Potter, who's I believe still out of a job at the moment at the time of recording, and then obviously you've got Lee Carsely, who was in charge of the young under 21s. So those are probably the three candidates in terms of if you're looking for an English manager. And let's explore that, because being realistic, I don't think this FA, with the structure of promoting youth players, are going to go with the foreign manager and risk that they're going to undo all the hard work that England have done with the youth setup. I would like to see Eddie Howe given it. But what I will say is, what I wanted to see from Lee Carsely, I have seen already. And it wasn't so much from the match. Yes, like everything that he did and everything that we've been screaming out for was great to see come to fruition. But I think when he got given the job on an interim basis, I expected him to pick 26 players, which is quite a safe 26 players. Pick a lot of Gareth Southgate's favourites, not go too bold, and not really upset the apple cart, because the last thing you want is to make a whole lot of noise before you've even officially got the job, and therefore rule yourself out of the running just based on the fact that you've put too many noses out of joint. But the fact that City went brave, and the fact that he chose to pick a lot of players like of Morgan Gibbs-White, where he didn't have to, he could have picked safer options like James Maddison. He didn't have to pick Angel Gomez. He could have picked Adam Morton. You didn't have to pick Noni Madueke when you've already got Bukayo Saka, Phil Foden, Cole Palmer, Jared Bowen in the squad. But he made those selections because those were the selections he believed were the best for this current squad and looking ahead to the future. And I think what I want from the England manager is to be brave in their convictions, but also brave when being brave is the hardest thing to do. It's all right being brave when you're losing 2-0, but when a game's in a balance, like maybe it was against Spain in the European Championship finals, is to make a change, do something about it, and don't wait for the situation to unfold. Be proactive and take charge of it. And so I think that's the early signs that we're seeing from Lee Carsely, which is why I like him. But if you were to ask me, I do think Eddie Howe is the best manager, but whether he's the best for international manager, we don't know, but we do have a record with Lee Carsely. What do you think, Tobes?
Yeah, I think with Lee Carsely, as you've said, you've summed it up really, really well there. I completely agree with him picking, I think, some of, obviously, the lads that he knows from the youth setup. And it's a strange one, because I think on paper, it just sounds like another boring pick of just going for the under-21s manager. Someone's been there, same as Gareth Southgate, making the step up. But I think that really undermines what Lee Carsely has done with those under-21s and how progressive tactically I think he really, really was, and how well he set them up. I mean, we saw Anthony Gordon playing as a second striker almost in a 4-4-2, which was obviously nowhere near where he was really playing for Newcastle as a pure out-and-out winger, and he was player of the tournament. And I think the way he set England up was what really helped them win that tournament, not just the quality of talent that he had in the squad. So for me, I think it would be a good pick. I think it would be a sensible pick. I think it would be, in terms of looking at, well, you look at the two finalists of the European Championship last time, De La Fuente, who was in the Spain setup for a number of years, the youth setup, was the under-21s manager, then got promoted, and Gareth Southgate the same. It did work with Gareth Southgate having someone who knew the setup behind the scenes, and I think that makes a huge difference, and it makes it a much easier transition for the manager coming in. And that would be my only worry with Eddie Howe, is that firstly, I don't think he would take the job if he got offered it through the middle of this season. And for me, I think we need to have a permanent manager appointed by the new year at the latest. I think we need at least 18 months to set up for the next World Cup in 2026. And unless there's been a catastrophic amount of form going on at Newcastle, I don't think Eddie Howe will take it midway through the season. And as you said, potentially some question marks with how he is in terms of international management. It is quite a big change. So I would agree that I think Eddie Howe probably is the best manager on paper, but at the moment I would give Carsley these few games and the next international break, and then I think he, as he is now, bookies odds on favourite to be it, and I can see why, really.
Yeah, but also if Eddie Howe wasn't doing so well with Newcastle, that probably puts a spot on his CV, and then probably maybe you don't want him. You probably want Newcastle to do really well, England to come along and go, do you want the job? And he goes, yeah, with the greatest respect, Newcastle, it is England's job. It is probably the job for any England manager coming up? You probably would say so, wouldn't you? But yeah, I think I want Eddie Howe to pick it up from that situation of Newcastle doing well, whereas I also think that Lee Carsely is probably, like you said, like odds-on favourite. I think he will end up getting it, and I would have nothing bad to say about him, because I think what he did with the under-21s was phenomenal. And yeah, what we've already seen, I can't say anything bad about him. What I will say though is, if England don't beat Finland in the next Nations League game on Tuesday, then all of a sudden everyone's head is going to absolutely fall off, and there is no way he's getting the job. While we're praising him so heavily at the moment, and rightly so, he could all change with just one result. So we'll have to wait and see on that one.
Yeah, and in terms of Potter, just to touch on him briefly, he obviously is out of a job at the moment. He wouldn't have that change like Howard, and I think I'd like him as an appointment maybe 2 or 3 years ago, when Bellingham was sort of first coming into the England setup as one of the main men. You had Saka, and I think he'd do well with that sort of young, up-and-coming sort of world-class players, and I think he could have set up for the next manager well, similar to how he did at Brighton. I think he was fantastic behind the scenes and being a real catalyst, I think, for what De Zerbi did when he got them into Europe. I think a lot of that came down to the foundations that Potter had led. The only question marks, I think, would be his term in terms of his time at Chelsea, and maybe how he would manage a much higher pressure environment with players who are a lot, I suppose, higher in calibre, compared to maybe the squad he had at Brighton. So he wouldn't be a bad choice, but maybe just not the right timing with, I guess, the pressure that England will have in the next World Cup with the squad we have and the talent we have.
Yeah, I think his time at Chelsea really did not... It just gives a bit of a sour taste. It's kind of, you're looking for the trajectory of a manager, and you constantly want to ride a good wave of momentum. So you want to be on the up and up and up. And all of a sudden now at Chelsea, because it was over so quickly after he got it, and it was such a bad run of form, that it kind of seems like he now needs to have another job before he takes the England one, where he needs to rebuild his career a little bit, do really well for a couple of years, and then maybe he can go up to that next level again. So I think, yeah, Potter right now probably isn't the manager to take the England job. But yeah, if he were to get it, I think it'd be okay. But I think now looking at it, I think I'd rather have Lee Carsely than Graham Potter. But let's say it is Lee Carsely who gets a permanent job, and he's probably going to be given a 4-year contract, I'd imagine, probably get the World Cup and the Euros after. What is success if you were to get the job?
I'm not sure if he would get a 4-year contract. I think he would get... I think if he was appointed, say, around sort of Christmas, New Year time, I think I think it would probably be a contract to the end of the Euros, honestly. I don't know if they take a risk of a 4-year contract at the moment. I could see him getting the Euros, and then maybe they'd have a reassessment after that. But
Well, so World Cup next.
Sorry, World Cup. Yeah, sorry, World Cup,
yeah.
And then go from there. Yeah, because I can't remember exactly what Southgate was given when he was appointed. But yeah, I just think maybe because it seems to be a few little question marks. I'm not too sure on that. But sorry, what was your question? I just completely went off on a tangent there about his contract instead.
No, that's fine. What a success if you were to get the job.
Success. What would success be if you were to get the job? I think it would have to be at least semi-finals of the World Cup. I think the pressure now that's on the squad, it felt like a bit of a disappointment that we didn't win the Euros, which is crazy to be in that position. So I think it would have to be at least semi-finals. And I think good, convincing performances, I think, is going to be a huge difference as well. I think if we get knocked out in the semis or maybe even the quarterfinals, if we've played well and just got unlucky, then I think that would still be a success. And I think that's something that a lot of people are going to be looking for is how we play as well, especially in those group stage games where we really did not impress in the Euros. I think if we have a good, promising, confident, as you said earlier, group stage, then yeah, I think semi-finals. But like we said, with the talent in the squad, they should really be going all the way.
So that's where I would disagree, because I think he will be given 4 years if he were to get the job, just because of the fact that if you think about, we had to give Gareth Southgate time, obviously, when he was first in the job, but he also earned it. So I think Lee Carsely would have to show between now and the World Cup, which I think he will do. He would have to show, a lot of promise, great attacking football, like you said. But then when you get to the tournament, do well. But at the same time, it's also the World Cup. There's a lot more teams of higher quality. And it's also his first tournament with the senior side. Yes, his experience at the under-21 level, but the pressure and expectation and the eyeballs is so much more with the senior team than it is with the under-21s, where I think you would have to give an international manager, as long as they don't absolutely bomb it and it's not a car crash, at least one tournament, because then the Euros after that is actually one at home, where it's England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Ireland hosting it. So you probably look at that one, and then it would be a repeat of Euro 2021, where it's like, can you win it now? I mean, the Euros is on home soil again. Can you win it this time? So for me, if you were to get it, I'd give him 4-year one and just say the aim is to win the Euros in 4 years, and just don't be bad at the World Cup is what I'd say.
That's great advice.
Yeah, don't be bad. But yeah, I think whatever happens, I think it's promising about looking forward to the future of English football, and I think that's all we want. We just want to be excited. But a Premier League side who we'll move on to next, who can be looking a little bit more fortuitously towards their Premier League future, are Leicester City. And so, right, if you don't know, Leicester City had allegedly broken financial fair play and profit and sustainability rules in the Premier League when they were last in the Premier League, which they got relegated in 22-23 season. They've since been promoted, and the Premier League are trying to sanction them for breaking Premier League rules and spending too much money. I think it's roughly around £20 million. However, it appears that they're not going to get a points deduction similar to what Everton and Nottingham Forest got, because of a technicality in the rules which states that you have to be a Premier League club to actually be sanctioned by the Premier League. And at the time that Leicester City were sanctioned, they had transferred their shares to Luton Town, who just come back up, and so Leicester City were technically a championship side, which therefore means the Premier League have no jurisdiction, and Leicester City will probably not be charged. So if you can get your head around all of that, Toby, what were your initial thoughts when you heard the news?
Yeah, I was quite surprised. I think I seemed fairly confident that the Premier League were going to be able to give them a points deduction, and I think that probably impacted a lot of people's predictions and maybe how they thought Leicester were going to go in the season. And it was actually almost a loophole that Leicester performed that really prevented them from getting that points deduction. Initially, their financial year end was ending, I can't remember exactly when it was. I think it may have been May or June or April, where they were a Premier League side. So their financial year end of 2023 was going to be, say, in April. Throughout that entire 3-year period from 2020 through to 2023, they were a Premier League club. It got to the point, I think, maybe where they knew that they weren't going to be a Premier League side, or they took the risk that they were going to get relegated, pushed their financial year back to the new championship season. So say they pushed it back to November or December in 2023. And because of those few months where they were a championship side and they weren't a Premier League side, the Premier League has no jurisdiction on that period, so they have no jurisdiction on the 3-year period where the PSR regulations sort of come into account. So it was a really clever loophole that Leicester were able to use, and I think the Premier League still are trying to sort of say that this was a loophole and that they've gone around the rules, and whether they do change PSR regulations now and that it won't take into account financial years and it will take into account instead seasons, football seasons, I'm not too sure, but they seem pretty annoyed, the Premier League, that Leicester were able to move things around to get away from this. But yeah, I think the effects of maybe the rumoured points deduction has already, I guess, taken quite a big toll on Leicester, especially in the transfer window, really.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, rightly so, I think Leicester were being a bit conservative because they didn't want to get close to the line, let alone go past it. So they wanted to stay within the rules, because now that they are back to being in the Premier League and being a Premier League side, that, you know, they wanted to make sure that their case was as ironclad as possible, and being anywhere near the financial line again was just not good for them. So they've been a bit conservative this time round. I think what's probably annoying a lot of fans, and especially if you're fans of Everton and Nottingham Forest, is they were on the other side where they managed to stay in the Premier League, and therefore they got point deduction. As we saw, Everton had 2 different ones and Nottingham Forest got one. Yeah, I think it was at the end of it. And so Leicester getting away with no point deduction doesn't feel, I suppose, in the spirit of the game, just because they got relegated and then got back up. Because there is now, well, I saw a couple of people talking about it, in the fact that if you were to have a terrible first half to your season, and then say you got 0 points in the first 19 games of the season, you're in January, and then you go, do you know what? We're going to ignore the rules. We're going to spend £200 million, and we're not going to worry about how much money we come back, because we're probably going to get relegated anyway. That club could then go down to the Championship, have an amazing squad because they spent £200 million in the Premier League, and then come back up the next year because their squad is so much better than everyone else. And then by the time they're back in the Premier League in 2 years' time, will probably be okay and be a Premier League side and won't get relegated because of the quality of the squad, and they would have improved that in the Championship and the time when they come back up. So in a weird way, it incentivizes teams who know that they're probably going to get relegated to just invest all the money they can, and in the hopes that they become a Premier League side again and bounce back straight away. And that is a bonkers state for teams to be in, and for the Premier League as a whole to be in. And I think that's what's quite annoying, because Everton and Nottingham Forest stayed in the Premier League. They're desperately trying to stay in the Premier League, and I'm sure Leicester were as well. But it feels like the Premier League has failed here, in the fact that they've been trying to enforce profit and sustainability rules, I think probably properly for the first time, although as fans we'll probably never know that. And it feels like they've done a great job of imposing punishments on the likes of Everton, Nottingham Forest, and making sure that they are probably sanctioned for breaking the rules. But now that it looks like, hypothetically, that they won't be able to enforce Leicester, it just feels like, you know, the spirit of the sport is gone.
Yeah, and I think that's where obviously there's such a strange overlap between sort of the financial side, the side of the club that's run like a business, where the money's coming from, where it's going, accounting, all that sorts of things, that overlaps with what is a sport and what should be entertainment, what should be fair for the fans. And I think there's not really much cohesion between those two just yet. And I think that's why the Premier League are annoyed that Leicester were able to get around this loophole and make it seem like it's unfair. And yeah, I will not be surprised if they try and make this fairer so that it's equal for all teams, whether you're being relegated, whether you're staying in the league, whether you've been in the league for 20 years, it shouldn't matter. And the rules should, in theory, be able to apply to every team evenly, no matter their financial year end. That's all it came down to, was just shifting that back a few months. And yeah, I would not be surprised if they somehow change the accounting periods to be football seasons. I'm not sure if that's something that would be doable. Yeah, you'd think in terms of fairness, with it does feel harsh on Everton and Nottingham Forest, because I'm sure if they knew they were going to get relegated, or if they were going to be relegated, that they would probably be doing the same. But because they didn't, as you said, they weren't able to. So it's a tough one, and it's a tough one because I also think with Leicester, they haven't got the points deduction, but I do think with people thinking that they did, it kind of has backfired a little bit for them in terms of the transfer window, that I think a lot of players may have been put off knowing that they're going to get a points deduction and probably just go back down to the Championship straight away again. And I think the club also potentially considering that and thinking they may be getting a points deduction, not spending as much. So but I still think that a very, very slight negative in terms of their transfer window definitely doesn't outweigh the fact that they were able to get around a points deduction.
Yeah, I think actually that's a very fair point in terms of player recruitment. I didn't actually think of that, but yeah, that is right. And I suppose, like you said, it's not the Premier League are going to have to rewrite the rules in terms of PSR and FFP, but it's not for us fans to decide what the rules are. It's you're the people in charge. You sort it out. So let's actually focus on the football because that's what we're best at as well. What do you think this means in terms of Leicester staying up in the Premier League? So, because I think, like you said, everyone was expecting them to get a point deduction. It looked like Leicester were probably going to go down. Now that it looks like they're not going to get a point deduction, do you see them staying up in the Premier League this year?
I think they've definitely got more of a chance than maybe I would have given them at the start of the season, because I was assuming that they were going to get a 6 or a 9 point deduction. I still think they'll probably go down. I think the promoted team's squads there is still a gap between them and the weakest Premier League sides. And for me, I would still probably say I think they're going to go down realistically. Yeah, I don't think it's enough of a change really for them to be able to stay up. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you just because I was hoping to see a little bit more from Leicester, and I don't know what more is, but just to be in games a lot more. Just because if you think about the point that they have got this season, the first 3 games, it was against Tottenham Hotspur at home. And if we're being honest, that Spurs dominated that game for the first 60 minutes. Leicester had a very good 20, but Spurs should have been 4 or 5-0 up at that point. So when Leicester got that goal, it should have just been a consolation. So I may be giving them a little bit more hope, but I don't think they're going to stay up in the Premier League. And yeah, I think it's still going to be hard for them, and I think it's going to be hard from now till January. But if they don't get a point deduction, then maybe in January they can go out there and recruit a bit more, because who knows what the rules are like, what other loopholes they potentially might have found, and also who knows, like you said, the players who maybe they were unavailable to get in the summer will now be more likely to come over in January. So that'll be an interesting one to watch what business they do in the summer in the January transfer window as well. But talking about Spurs, let's preview the North London derby, the big game on the weekend. And I wanted to ask you first, Toby, because Arsenal 7 points in the first 9 points available. Spurs 4 points from the first 9 points available. For which team is this the more important game?
That is a good question. Immediately, I was going to say Arsenal, just because they are going for the title again this season, and I think last week against Brighton, despite all of the potential controversy with the Rice red card that we touched on last week, that they performed not as well as they should have done, didn't convert enough chances, and that we need this, I think, to bounce back a little bit. But also for Spurs, like you said, 4 points out of 9, a disappointing result against Leicester, played very well against Newcastle but weren't able to get a result. If they lose this, it's 4 points out of 12, which is really tough for them, and they are going to be chasing for top 4 as well. They've got a race of their own that they need to meet. So I think it's pretty even, to be honest. I think it's a pretty even in terms of what is to play for both sides, really.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The only thing I will say, is literally 4 games into the season and no top 4 race or no Premier League title is won or lost 4 games in. I think from Arsenal's perspective, because you are away, you're away. So I think I'd say 7 points from 9 is a decent start to the season. I think if you're chasing for the title, ideally you'd be on 9. But I think the circumstances around the Brighton game mean that 7 from 9 is a good result. What I will say though is, I looked at your fixtures after the international break, and your first 3 now are Spurs away, Atalanta away on a Thursday night. The new Champions League is absolutely mental. And then you've got Manchester City away on the Sunday. So it does feel like 3 very big games very early on in the season. What is the mood like at the moment being an Arsenal fan?
Yeah, I still think it's really positive. I still think a lot of Arsenal fans feel confident that we're going to win the league, if not be right up there again to the last day again. Champions League, another one that we should be really pushing for, getting deep into that competition. And yeah, I still feel like it feels good. We had a good transfer window. I think the Sterling signing on loan is a huge plus and something that we all felt that we really needed, and needed cover for Saka, needed someone who's going to be able to come off the bench and make an impact. And I think to be able to get a loan deal paying only £100,000 a week for Sterling, I think is a no-brainer, that even if it doesn't go particularly well, it's not much lost either. So yeah, it still feels really positive. In terms of the Tottenham side, it's a difficult one to tell because I think they've played pretty well so far this season. Mainly, it's obviously only been 3 games, but I think against Newcastle they looked good. I think in the Leicester game they were a little bit poor, but I think in their win they looked strong as well. It was a big win as well, and they needed that, and they need a few more of those. So I think maybe the Spurs camp feel a little bit more like it's a little bit less confident, but I certainly don't feel overly confident as an Arsenal fan going into this game at all, because I know Spurs are a really quality side, and I think they've definitely got enough to be able to win this game, or make it at least a very tough competition, if not.
Yeah, the North London derby it's always a bonkers game of football, regardless of who wins. And I think like this one will be absolutely no different. I'll answer the question which I posed to you about which team I think this is the bigger game for. I do look at it and I do think that this is the big game for Arsenal, if I'm being honest, just because I think even if Spurs were to lose this game, in the grand scheme of the whole season, it feels like less of a blow. It almost feels like nothing, if we're being honest, if they end up losing this game. Yes, obviously pride and, the rivalry against your enemies, but I think for Arsenal, if you were to lose this game and then be 7 from 12, and you'd expect Manchester City to be 12 from 12, and then go into the game away at the Etihad, it does not in terms of points, because I think it is so very early on, and just because Man City are off to a phenomenal start doesn't mean that they won't drop off at some point, whether it be around Christmas or towards the end of the year. Who knows? Because every season is different. I do think that mentally, though, it may come across as maybe we are not as good as them, maybe we are inferior, because, like we said, they yet to play Rodri and start him. And you think about it, they still haven't really got the best out of Phil Foden in the first 3 games. Kyle Walker's still to come back, John Stones. So it feels like it's the warm up, but Man City are already like in 6th or 7th gear. So that's why I just think that maybe from a mental perspective, I think even if Spurs were to lose, they can still go, well, we're going for the top 4, and other top 4 sides will drop points between now and the end of the season. Whereas Arsenal, if you've got this image in your head of Man City being all conquering and invincible, then all of a sudden being 5 points away from them, you'd assume if Arsenal were to lose the North London derby to then go away to the Etihad, I think psychologically that could be a blow. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, 100%. I think if that Brighton 1-1 draw came sort of in February, March, it would feel like a huge blow, and I think it should still feel like that at the start of the season. I know you were saying obviously the title's not lost in the first few games, but as we always say, when you come up against Man City, you have almost got to be perfect, and I think it was 3 points that should have been won based on the game and based on the opposition, really, and it did feel like 2 points dropped in that game. And as you've said, we need to come back, win this one, and be set up as well as we can for that City away game. And in this coming North London derby, I think the big question mark is around Declan Rice, really. He's going to be missing, and who is going to be playing in place of him. For me, it's down to, I guess, 3 options. I think it's either going to be Jorginho who's going to step into that midfield, or even potentially Zinchenko playing on that left-sided 8 with Partey as the 6. They would be straight swaps, or we could see that we saw at the start of last season, Havertz dropping into the left-sided 8 and playing either Trossard or Jesus if he is fit up front. So a few options there, none of which for me are massively convincing, to be honest. I think Jorginho is probably the best option to go in there and then push Partey out to the left side and play Jorginho as a 6. But yeah, neither of those fill me with too much confidence. And I think if we were up against potentially a stronger midfield besides Basuma and Sarr, I would be pretty worried, I think.
Yeah, you said there's options there, and I didn't even think about it. I just obviously the headline Declan Rice isn't playing, and I was like, oh, it's awesome. But I was like, oh yeah, Mika Marino did injure his shoulder. He's not going to be there. And now that you said the options, I agree with you. I don't hate them, but I actively dislike all 3 of them. I think the fact of moving moving Kai Havertz out of that front line into the midfield to replace Declan Rice, I think it's one where I'm not too comfortable with it, even though I know Jesus would do a great job up front and then Havertz would do a good job in midfield. It just feels like you're making more changes than necessary because you're moving a player who's perfectly comfortable and happy and probably in your best 11 is a centre forward in that side rather than a midfielder. You're moving him out of position to play midfield. You're then bringing in another player. So it feels like there's too many changes there. I wonder if, I don't know if Arteta would do this, maybe you've got a better insight than me, if would he change formation to play Jorginho and Partey together in a double pivot and Odegaard as a central number 10? Would that be something he'd do? Because I think that'd be what I would look at and think that looks the most feasible and probably the best option.
Yeah, potentially. I don't know if it will be sort of a pure formation change and maybe just at times when we are off the ball. I mean, we defend in a 4-4-2 anyway, so it would obviously be Jorginho and Partey sort of as the two midfield, and Odegaard pushes up as a pressing striker. So I don't think it would be too much change. And then at times, Partey coming in. But I think whoever is going to be playing left back, whether it's Calafiori, Zinchenko or Timber, they do sort of come in and sit alongside whoever's going to be in there anyway. So if it is going to be Partey, Jorginho and Odegaard, yeah, there will definitely be times where they're sitting as a two and Odegaard is further forward. I just think it will still be one of the two. Not sure which. They both, I think, have their cons of slowly drifting forward. Will still be sort of in that Declan Rice role, and I think whoever is there as well, it's going to be a big drop off in terms of cover of our left back. And I think whoever's playing right wing for Spurs, whether it's Kulusevski, Johnson, Werner, whoever it could be, that is one area that I think Spurs need to massively highlight and try and get some space and some luck there without Declan Rice in the ground that he covers. Because Partey and Jorginho, as good as they are on their day and as good as they are on possession, I think off the ball, that's where I think the biggest drop probably is when you lose Rice.
Yeah, I think that's fair, mate. I mean, I'm trying to think of who Spurs played there against Newcastle, but I think it was Maddison, but then also Kulusevski, and then like players were inverting all over the place. So yeah, I do look at that midfield, and all of a sudden it's weird how important Declan Rice has become to your side, because obviously we know he's a quality player, but without him, all of a sudden, like, okay, there's no Declan Rice replacement in the side, and unfortunately it probably is Mikel Merino, and that's just a freak injury, so you just can't do anything about it. It's just really unfortunate, and you just got to move on and try to get on with it. Before we move on, though, I will just throw one thing out there. I was really impressed with him in pre-season, and I don't think it'll happen. But is there any chance that Ethan Nwaneri will play there in midfield?
There is a chance. Yeah, there is a chance. Whether Arteta would do that, I think in such a big game, such a big occasion as North London Derby, I'm not too sure. But yeah, he's been on the bench this season for our Premier League games. And if he's on the bench, he should be an option as well. And one that, yeah, I didn't even consider. So I think that's a good shout. And probably too early, and probably I don't think Arteta would throw him in like that. But yeah, definitely an option. Which would be really exciting to see. As you said, in pre-season, he looked really sharp. And as young as he is, he plays a few years older. So
Yeah, he's one that I saw and I was like, okay, I'm going to invest stock in you because you look like a real baller. So yeah, like I said, I don't think it'll happen, but just one I wanted to check out there. Go on then. Give me your combined Arsenal Spurs 11. Let's do it together actually, because
okay, yeah,
I won't throw you under the bus. In goal, is it David Raya?
I think it probably has to be. So far this season, anyway, he's been exceptional. He's been one of our best players. Golden Glove winner last year. And yeah, as good as Vicario is, I really rate Vicario. I think he was really good last year too. I think maybe it's just my bias, but I think it is just David Raya. Just.
Yeah, I think to be fair, I think Ray and Vicario are probably neck and neck. I just think the first 3 games of the season, the saves that Ray has made, the one against Wolves from Strand Larsen from the header diving to his right hand side, diving to his left hand side, and then I think the one from Ollie Watkins, the header, which he probably should have scored, but again, a great save. I think he's really showing his stopping ability as well. And when you think about the amount of goals the Spurs have conceded already this season, probably. Yeah. Not Vicario, yeah. So we probably just edge it and give it to Raya.
Yeah.
Is the back two just Saliba and Gabriel, or is there a shout for maybe Mickey van der Ven?
If any, I'd probably say it'd be a shout for Romero. Maybe. I really like Van der Ven. I think he's gonna be superb in like 2 or 3 years, and I think obviously his recovery is really, really good. Great on the ball. I just don't think. Yeah, I just think Saliba and Gabriel probably are it. It's difficult. Like, I don't want to just say all the Arsenal players, but I think defensively, I think it's kind of got to be, looking at the numbers as well last year.
Yeah, when you think about it, you probably want someone who's a bit of a Rolls Royce, and you want someone who's a bit of a fighter. And I think it's probably going to be Saliba or Mickey van der Ven, which I think it has to be Saliba. And then it's Gabriel or Romero. And yeah, I think Gabriel is very underrated, and I will happily also go with Gabriel. I think fullbacks, though, that's where something Spurs definitely have a shout at, because I think you can maybe argue. Well, I really like Pedro Porro, and I think left back with no consistent starting left back, it looks like it maybe Timber might be Calafiori eventually. I think Spurs fans could have a shout for a left back with a Doji as well.
Yes, yeah, left back I think is Udogie. I think, as you've said, we don't have a consistent starter there, and it would be unfair to put one of our options in if they're not even guaranteed starter for us. So yeah, Udogie, really, really like him. Great on the ball. Weird role that he plays at left back, but he does it so well, and he's really good at a lot of things, which I really, really like. Pedro Porro, I think's the same. He's good at a lot. He's really great going forward. He's solid enough defensively, and I think maybe with Ben White, it feels like they're quite different. So Ben White's obviously really good defensively, great in the air, can invert and come in, but can also sit in a back three as well. Oh, it's a close one. I'd be happy with either. I would probably just use my Arsenal bias and go for Ben White, but I'm going to put this one up to you for right back and let you pick it, because I think they're both quality.
And because you're biased, we'll go for Porro. So
Nice.
Udogie and Porro. And then into the midfield, I guess for Arsenal, the best three, you probably say is Partey, Rice, and Odegaard. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So which of the Spurs midfielder would say get into that? Does Maddison get a shout? Probably. Oh, he'd be up against Martin Odegaard, wouldn't he? Or could you play?
I think you could go Maddison, Rice, and Odegaard. You could have Rice as a 6. I think Basuma and Sarr aren't as good as Maddison generally. I know it's not quite like for like, but in terms of just having 3 in the midfield.
Yeah, I think we could do that. No chance of maybe Bentancur or I'm just looking at the list now, and you got Maddison, Basuma, you've got Dejan Kulusevski if he plays in midfield, if that's an option. You got Sarr, Gray, Bentancur. I think probably these are the for Spurs. It's Basuma, Maddison, Bentancur as their best 3. I think Rice and Odegaard have to be in, and so Maddison or Partey, and then I think I'll happily go for Maddison as well. That was pretty easy.
Yeah, I think it could work as a 3. You have Rice sit in, Maddison and Odegaard go forward, just play ultra attacking. But yeah, I think Maddison's their strongest midfielder, and as you said, I don't think any of the others are particularly better than Rice and Odegaard at the moment.
Yeah, so Saka right wing, and we're just moving on.
Yeah, I think it's got to be, hasn't it?
Is it the same for Heung-min Son on the left-hand side?
Yeah, I think I agree. Martinelli and Trossard, really like both of them, but Son is just that level above.
Oh, so then who do you go with up front? Is it Dominic Solanke? Is it Kai Havertz or is it potentially Jesus? I'll chuck him in there as well. Why not?
Yeah, it's got to be between Solanke and Havertz at the moment. Havertz has started the season really, really well. Ended the season really well last year. Very different players. Solanke obviously being an excellent finisher, sort of being a classic number 9, and Havertz almost the complete opposite. A really strange player, I guess, in build and play style. Oh, that is really difficult.
Yeah, because they're so different as well. So the strengths of each are very different.
Yeah, I'm gonna just go for my bias and just go for Havertz. I think I really like him, and I think in the last sort of 15 league games, he's been so good. He really has stepped up, and I think he's really changed how we've been playing in a positive way. And he's completely cemented himself in that striker position for Arsenal now. And Solanke, yeah, he's obviously been injured at the start of this season.
So
big money move. Oh no, I don't know. I don't want to be labelled as a ridiculously biased Arsenal fans if that's a shocking pick, but
no, I don't. That's the thing. I don't think it's shocking because if it was shocking, I'd tell you that it was. But I genuinely think that This is a lot closer than a lot of people think, because they'll look at the goals of Solanke and think, oh, it's a centre forward, he gets the goals, but then they'll underappreciate what else he does. Whereas with Havertz, you're like, oh, okay, he does everything else, and then they'll actually forget about how many goals he does actually score. So
Yeah.
I think, I tell you what, we'll leave it that as R10. And if in the comments below of people
Oh,
watching,
look at that.
if there we go, classic YouTuber. If you want to let us know, would you go for Dominic Solanke or would you go for Kai Havertz up front in this side? Let us know, because it'll be really interesting to see, because neither of us seem to have a clue. Then talking about not having a clue, should we then move on to the quiz?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Let's get into it. The Football Fellowship halftime quiz, where at the moment we're doing guess the club based on the 5 players, and we're going to start off with the most obscure, getting all the way down to the least obscure, and then the earlier on you get it, the more points that you get. And who's winning at the moment, Toby?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, we're both running bang in the middle, bang average, 5 points each, an average of 2.5 from the last 2 episodes each. Yeah, so very, very mid-table at the moment.
Very mid-table, a bit like Man United. Sorry.
Couldn't help yourself, could you?
No, I couldn't. We'll talk about Man United a bit more later on afterwards. But yeah, 5 apiece at the moment, and I'm pretty sure that you went first last time. So I
Yep.
think I'm going to chuck myself in it, and I would like to go first this time.
All right, are you ready for your first player?
I am.
Your first player for 5 points is George Best.
So this is going to expose my age and potentially my lack of ball knowledge. And you'll probably tell me afterwards, and I'll know straight away, and I'll be like, oh, of course. But I can't think of a team for George Best, so I'm just going to go pass. And please, if you're listening or watching, please don't kill me.
Okay, it's a pass on the first one. So your second player for 4 points is Adel Taarabt.
Adel Taarabt, obviously of Spurs, QPR, AC Milan, Benfica, and I'm sure a bunch of rogue teams while on loan. And I'm probably some permanent sides as well, which I can't think of. What vibe do you think? What vibe were you trying to get me to think with George Best and Adel Taarabt? Do you know what? Let's go for Spurs.
It is not Spurs, unfortunately. Your third player for 3 points is Andre Schürrle.
Andre Schürrle, and now I think I know what vibe you want me to go. And I've just remembered that Adel Taarabt also played for this side. Is it by any chance Fulham?
And it is Fulham for 3
Yes.
points. A great answer, mate. Well done.
Thank you. I was actually thinking of Andre Schürrle because he's got a YouTube channel about his running now, which he does post-retirement, and I watched his video earlier on today. So a cheap plug for Andre Schürrle there.
Yeah, I'm sure he needs it. Yeah, that was a great shout, mate. I was stuck between going for him or Dimitar Berbatov for the third player. Yeah, George Best, he was there in 1976 for 1 season. Adel Taarabt was there 13-14, a loan from QPR. Schürrle, 18-19 loan, one of the last years of his career, I'm pretty sure, on loan from Dortmund. 2 points of the fourth player would have been Brian Ruiz, the Costa Rican legend, played nearly 100 games there.
A streets won't forget player.
Yeah, a few of them in that list, to be fair. And then the last one, the big man, Brede Hangeland. Over 200 games, over 6 years for Fulham. So, yeah, that's a very, very good 3-pointer there, mate, on Andre Schürrle.
Oh, thank you very much, mate. Yeah, I remember Brede Hangeland from FIFA in the noughties. He used to be 80 rated. I mean, he was a beast, like 6'5", left-footed. He was great.
Yeah, like 97, 98 strength, I think, or something. Ridiculous. What a man.
I know.
Big bread.
Yeah, back in the days when FIFA wasn't just all about half-ass or forward players and defenders nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yes, comments, please go generously on the George Best one. So, Toby, you ready for yours?
I certainly am.
Cool. Well, so your first player for 5 points is Yaya Sanogo.
Yaya Sanogo. Okay. Oh, where is it? Obviously Arsenal. Oh, where did he go? I'm pretty sure he had a loan at Palace. I think that's the only side I can think of. There's obviously a French side. Maybe Monaco. But I can't think. The only one I'm pretty sure that he went to was Palace. So I'll go for Palace.
That is not the answer I'm looking for. So
Damn.
your next player for 4 points is, and I'm sorry about the pronunciation, Arkadiusz Milik.
Ah, Milik, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I gave you him the other week.
Did you?
Yeah, when we did Leverkusen. So I really should know his career path. And I don't.
Oh, God.
He has got
Thank
Leverkusen.
God.
He's got Napoli. He's got Juve. He's also got Marseille. He's also got Ajax. And besides that, I think he had another German side maybe around the Leverkusen years. But I don't know it. So it's between Marseille and Ajax. Has Sonogo ever been at Marseille? I feel like Sonogo's been at Ajax. I don't know why. Oh, God. Whichever one I say, if it's not that, I'm going to be annoyed. Let's go for Marseille.
That is incorrect. That is
No!
not the club I'm looking for. Sorry,
For
mate.
God's sake.
Well, your third player for 3 points is Zlatan Ibrahimovic.
Is it Ajax?
Is that your answer?
Yes.
That is correct. Well done.
Oh, that's so annoying. I thought I had to go for Marseille with Sonogo being French, so
Yeah,
I'll take 3.
I didn't think Sonogo went to Ajax. It was such a rogue one. He only made 3 appearances in 15-16 on loan from Arsenal.
Oh, I could picture it. I had it pictured in the back of my head. Like, I thought, I can imagine him being there, but then I wasn't sure if I was getting him confused with Chuba Akpom, who's obviously, I think he's there at the moment, so yeah. We'll take 3 though. Happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I mean, you did really well because Milik was on loan at Ajax in 14-15, but obviously he was at Bayer Leverkusen, and then he made the permanent transfer from Bayer Leverkusen to Napoli. So I was thinking that maybe you wouldn't know he was on loan there. Obviously, Zlatan was there from 01 to 04. Then I would have given you Joel Veltman, who was there from 2012 to 2020, in the hopes that you wouldn't have remembered who he transferred to Brighton from, because it has been 4 years now. And then the last one would have been Jordan Henderson.
Yeah, that Veltman one would have been sneaky. I don't think I would have known that.
Yeah, I think you probably would have guessed, obviously, his nationality and been like, oh, okay, probably somewhere in the Netherlands. But then with the others, you might have known Ajax. So, yeah.
That's true. Nice.
That's right.
8 apiece. It's still a tie.
8 apiece, it's still a tie. And that's exactly how we like it. Got to keep it exciting. Got to keep everyone coming back for the next few ones as well.
Get it down to the final day.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll move on then to our next topic, which is who won the transfer window. Obviously, the transfer window has now slammed shut, as they like to say on Sky Sports, which means that all 20 Premier League sides have made the transfers in and out. And there's been a lot of business, there's been a lot of money spent. But in your opinion, Toby, who had the best transfer window?
It's a tough question, because I think as well, you've kind of got to think about outgoings a little bit. You've got to think about value, I think, in terms of players signed. You've got to think about what do teams actually need. For me, I couldn't really get a definitive one. I've got 4 teams written down here, which I think are probably the obvious picks for a lot of people. I've got West Ham, Brighton, Spurs, and Villa. They're my 4 that for me I think I've had the strongest window overall. Who have you got, just before we sort of go into a bit more detail?
So, in terms of those who I had considered, I agree with you on West Ham. I agree with you with Villa. Who were the other 2 you said?
Brighton and Spurs.
I agree with you with Brighton, and I disagree with Spurs, because if I was to do a tier list, I had them more in the middle of the pack rather than up there. The team who I was considering was also Ipswich Town, as a side who newly promoted, and I think all you want is for newly promoted side just to give it a good go and to try their best to stay in the Premier League. And I think in terms of the business that Ipswich Town had done, I look at it and think, what more could they have done? And I actually don't think they could have done any more. So that's why for me, they also had to be in the consideration.
Yeah, no, that's completely fair. I think Ipswich were just slightly below those 4 for me, and I didn't want to pick more than 4 because it was sitting on the fence enough, not just picking one. So yeah, I completely get Ipswich. In terms of the other 4, the reason I think probably I've got Spurs in there, and I can maybe understand why people don't. 2 things for me with Spurs. I think they've got rid of a lot of sort of deadwood in their club in terms of players who just don't really fit the system, just up on pretty high wages in terms of Højbjerg and Lo Celso. I think are 2 players that they've sort of moved on. Good players, but just players they don't exactly need at the moment. And the second, bringing in Archie Gray, for me, I think is one of the signings of the season and has gone so under the radar. He isn't going to play a lot at the moment, but for me, probably one of like the hottest young prospects in Europe. I think he looks absolutely incredible, and I was so shocked to see that Spurs signed him, and I think it felt maybe a little bit early for him to be signed in terms of his career, but I think that's a really, really good thing and a great piece of business, if not anything else, for Spurs. And he, for me, yeah, is going to be one of the top players in 2 or 3 years, and even then, he'll still only be 20.
Yeah, I agree on Archie Gray. I think that if we're talking about England and the future of the next World Cup, I think there's a shot that by the time that comes around, he's going to be knocking on the door, if not breaking it down. And if not that, then I can definitely see him going to the Euros in 4 years' time if everything goes well. The reason why I didn't necessarily have Spurs, although I agree with the point that you made, is that I don't feel like they did everything they possibly could. In terms of recruitments, if you think about it, they've really got 3 out-and-out centre-backs in Romero, Mickey van der Ven and Dragusin. They've still got to be playing Ben Davies at both left centre-back and left-back cover for Mickey van der Ven and Destiny Udogie, 2 of the best players. And if you can remember, and if you're a loyal fan and watch the first video we put out of the new season, the second season, with what everything your club needs to fix, and I said for me that Spurs need to sort out who's going to deputise for Mickey van der Ven and Destiny Udogie, because without them there is a drop off in terms of the defence of Tottenham Hotspur. And I think we saw that because yes, it is maybe fine margins, but in the Newcastle game, does Josh Murphy run through and goal if that's Mickey van der Ven for the second goal? I don't think so. When Romero does go charging out for the first goal, can Van der Ven's pace up and get into position a bit better? Maybe. And I just think that at some point, Van der Ven will get injured again, and at some point Destiny Udogie will get injured again. And when you also got Europa League as well, I feel like that is such a glaring, obvious part of the team and the whole squad that we highlighted probably at the start of the new season of the Football Fellowship, but also I think it was obvious for everyone at the end of last season that Spurs definitely need to be doing that. So I don't think they addressed everything they possibly could have, and you can maybe argue that the right player wasn't on the market, but what I'd say is there a player who's young but also better than what you have? I think, and I look at the profiles out there, and I think probably so. Maybe not one player, maybe there's 2 players. Maybe Spurs didn't want to spend the money. Maybe they were happy with the money they'd already spent. But for me, it just knocked me down a little bit, because if you talk about what else they did, I think it was really positive in just that one area, which I think could come back to hurt them, as we've maybe already seen so far this season. So that's why I didn't have them up there for me.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough, and I do think Spurs still could do with a couple of players in their squad. Just maybe it would have been a little bit too much for one transfer window, and I could definitely see them signing someone who does fill that void in January, especially if they are hit by a few injuries. In terms of definitely not missing out on signings, West Ham and Brighton both spent a lot of money, but spent it really, really well, strengthened their squad with real quality. And just out of both of those 2 teams, one for me that I think has gone under the radar is Aaron Wan-Bissaka to West Ham. 15 million, Prem proven, was a starter for Man United, really solid defender, decent on the ball. I think that's quite underrated, that he's actually a decent carrier of the ball. He's a solid passer. He's not the best crosser and not amazing in the final third, but I think in terms of build-up, he's certainly good enough for West Ham, and given Kufal's age, I think a good upgrade and someone who's gone straight into their squad. So yeah, both of those teams that you said you sort of agreed with and having really good windows, yeah, I think spent a lot and spent really well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think when I'm looking at the West Ham squad now, I've just got it up on my phone, and I just think that they've got 2 great players in every position, and that's without the fact that they don't even have Europe this year. So you probably say that for the top sides, got to make sure with all the fixtures have 2 players for each position. But you look at the West Ham side and you look at it and you think to yourself, is there any area of that squad where they don't have 2 players who could come in and do a fantastic job? And I just think, no, the entire squad is filled with quality. I mean, probably Fulker coming in, probably not starting just yet. Maybe it's going to take him a little bit more time, but he is 31 years of age, if I'm right. So maybe that's the only thing where it's like we probably want him to already be starting and scoring goals. But I think, yeah, that West Ham squad is really, really good. I also do like Brighton's business. I mean, I think like everyone else, I think it's quite boring. Everyone's been talking about it, but their business has been really, really good. I will say the one area, a bit like Spurs, where I think that they maybe could have done with a bit more, is at the back, is at centre back. Because when you look at their centre back options, I've got Dunk and Van Hecke as the first two choice centre backs. Then after that, you got Igor Santos, who I think is a good young player, but maybe needs a bit more time. And then you also think about the likes of Adam Webster, who's probably a really solid option, but probably not quite the elite level. I think they are very much banking on Van Hecke to go up a level and improve and use the coaching of Fabian Hurlitzer to go up another level. But I think in terms of the rest of the squad, no issues whatsoever. So let's actually talk about who you went for in the end. Who was your number one choice, Toby?
Yeah, so out of those 4 teams, just to touch on Villa really, really briefly.
Oh yeah, sorry, forgot about Villa.
Love the signing of Onana. It's replaced Douglas Luiz really well. Different type of player, but I think that's probably progressed their style of play. If anything, a little bit more fantastic carry. Really like him. And the sale of Diaby, selling a what was essentially a bench player for them, the money they got. And as much as I love Diaby, fantastic business on there. Yeah, one player, if I had to pick, I think it would have to be West Ham, as a lot of people have said.
Yeah.
I think it's for me. It's got to be. They've just signed really well, as you've said, strengthened that squad fantastically, and I think signed some players that are going to carry them forward. So yeah, for me, best window, West Ham. What do you reckon?
Well, I think I gave it away a little bit earlier on, but yeah, I think for me it is Ipswich Town, just because, like I said, in terms of what you wanted the Premier side to do and what they've done, I don't think they could have done any more. I mean, in terms of striking department, they've got Liam Delap, who, yes, didn't set the championship alight last year, but we saw with his fantastic goal against Fulham that he does look like a solid Premier League striker. Think about the talisman last year for Amari Hutchinson. Then with the sprinkling of top quality championship and players from Premier League sides who weren't getting game time, you think of like Jacob Greaves, who was at Hull, Jack Clark, who was at Sunderland, Dara Shea from Burnley, Sammy Smodics from Blackburn, Arna Muric from Burnley, Chidozie Ogbene, which I don't think is getting talked about enough. You really liked him, I think, for Luton last year in the championship, and I completely agree as well. Connor Townsend, who's just a free transfer, smart signing from West Brom. Ben Johnson on a free from West Ham, and Calvin Phillips on loan. Yeah, I mean, sure, it might not keep Ipswich Town up, but I think in terms of spending £120 million, recouping only maybe 5 of that in transfers outgoing, so they've gone out there, they've got the money from the Premier League, and they've spent it, so they're investing into the squad, and I don't think they can do much more than that.
Yeah, and it's going to be, again, I think one of those things where if they do go down, they've at least given it a really good go, and you can't complain that they haven't been nervous and haven't just assumed that they are going to go back down. As you said, really giving it a go and spending well.
Yeah, absolutely. Which brings us on to then the final topic. The teams who have impressed you in the first 3 games and the teams that haven't. I'll go first. I'll chuck a team out there who have impressed me. Obviously, we touched on a little bit with the transfers, and that's Brighton and Hove Albion. 7 points from the first 9 available. And when you think about the fixtures, Everton away, which was a 3-0 win. Man United at home, which was a 2-1 win. And then Arsenal away, which was a 1-1 draw. If you think about the opponents they've had to face and the points that they've got, considering the style of football they've played, under uncertainty of a new manager, being from the second division in the German league and being 31 years of age, how's the experience going to do? First time in the Premier League, all the money they spent on players, hopefully it all works out. And then you think about the fact that it just automatically, not only just another safe pair of hands, but another set of hands who look like they could take Brighton to the next level. I think Brighton have really impressed me with how quickly the change that they've implemented in the summer has already come to fruition.
Yeah, it feels like the style of play is slightly different, but the results are still there. And I think that attacking football that produces really high output, sort of in terms of XG, is still there consistently, despite loads of changes in the back room with the manager and the staff, and loads of changes in terms of the squad as well with the amount of signings that they've made. So yeah, really, really good start for a tough bunch of fixtures. And I think just to transition that onto another team who have impressed me, I think are in similar circumstances, but also kind of in the opposite circumstances, is Liverpool. A new manager, some question marks about obviously replacing someone who was so successful at the club in terms of Klopp, and almost no signings, obviously with Chiesa being the late signing who hasn't featured just yet. I think the way that they have carried on their form, playing a different formation, playing a slightly different style of play, and they look just as good as they did last year, if not even better. And it seems that, yeah, again, same as Brighton, not much of a transition period. Really, really impressed so far this season.
Yeah, it's something as a Liverpool fan that's actually been really nice to see, because all the talk and speculation, and I've been speculating about it as well, about the uncertainty, what the Liverpool side are going to bring, what they're going to look like, and the fact that you could just get to the start of the season and just win games of football. Honestly, 3 points and a win just covers up so much, and I think when you think about it, the fact that Arne Slot's system is a little bit more controlled than Jurgen Klopp's, a little bit more possession based, also means that the players are running less, which is actually encouraging to see, because Liverpool, with their massive injury issues towards the back end of last season, if you remember back to the Carabao Cup final when we had to bring on youngsters and the youngsters won it for us at the end, I do think that maybe that'll hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood, everything like that, mean that Liverpool won't pick up as many injuries. Plus, when you've also added the addition of Federico Chiesa, who in pre or post ACL injury, whether you want to talk about him being a different player, I think he's a slightly different player. I think you can tell that from the money that Liverpool has spent, or should I say the lack of money Liverpool has spent, because he's a really good fee. I think he will be a player who will come in and deputise under Mo Salah and be a suitable alternative to him, not just a Doak and Gordon, who are very young players who look very promising, but an experienced player who has played at the highest level, won Scudettos with Juventus, won the Euros with Italy as well. So that's very encouraging to see. And more than anything else, I think just Arne Slot just being his own man, not trying to replicate Jurgen Klopp as maybe some new incoming manager would have done. And I think it just means that Liverpool are in a very good pair of hands at the moment. Who has not impressed you so far this season, Toby?
Yeah, three actually, I'd say, are all in this position for me, because I was expecting them to do quite well. Maybe not straight away, and I'm sure that they will get better as the season goes on. But yeah, three teams I was looking forward to sort of pushing up into mid-table at least were Wolves, Everton, and Palace. Wolves, yeah, I think have just looked really disappointing. They got that point against Forest, but I think they were the weaker team in that game. Everton, I think the less said, the better. I think we've spoken about them enough in terms of how poor defensively they've been, how much they've missed Branthwaite. What even happened in the last 5 minutes of last week was ridiculous, and they played well in that, so it's looking a little bit brighter maybe, but I think that ending of the game has just thrown away any good work they've done. And then Palace, not started this season as they ended the last, and just look a little bit slow, a little bit sluggish, and unfortunately a little bit over-reliant maybe on Eberechi Eze, which is something that when they were playing under Glasner and Elise left, it did leave a big sort of gaping hole there that Eze is now almost having to fill on his own. So yeah, three teams, slow starts, but yeah, three teams I was expecting to do a lot better.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, even if you are a fan of any of those three teams, I think you can look at it and go, it's only 3 games into the season. And yes, we know that, we're saying that as well. But there are also, you could also say, for example, for Wolves, you could say, oh yeah, but we played Arsenal away, we played Chelsea at home, so what do you expect? And I think that's a very fair argument. You could go for Crystal Palace, and then you could say, yeah, but it's probably just glad we're just happy to see the end of the transfer window with all of our best players leaving, and the likes of Michael Elise, Joaquin Anderson, Sam Johnson left as well, Jordan Ayew left, so there's a lot of depth missing from Crystal Palace as well. So they're probably just happy that the transfer window open and now the season can start. And for Everton, yeah, okay, maybe not, maybe not Everton, but I think for the two you could definitely make a good case for. And I think for Everton, let's be honest, they'll be absolutely fine with Sean Dyche. There's no need to throw the dummy out of the bathwater just yet. And the last 2 seasons, they haven't won a game in August either, and they've been fine. So I think for all three sides, regardless of how you look at it, they can all still look at it quite positively, because it's only 3 games into the season. I think obviously the big one, which again, we don't need to go into too much detail because we've gone into it, everyone else has gone into it as well, is obviously Manchester United. Only 3 points, only 3 points on the first 9 available, beating Fulham at home 1-0, losing to Brighton 2-1 away, and then losing to Liverpool at home 3-0 as well. They've obviously been the talk of the international break, because obviously you are when you lose to your rivals 3-0 at home, but I also don't think it's been as bad as everyone thinks of it. Obviously, massive pressure on Manuel Ugarte to come to the midfield and just automatically fix everything, which is never going to happen. So if you're a United fan, being realistic in what your expectations of him is going to be important, because new young player coming to a new league, I think he will take a little bit of adjustment period as well. So let's not expect the world from him just to fix all of Man United's issues, because he's not going to do that. And also we need to think about the fact that the next 2 games, I think, are Southampton and Crystal Palace. So those are quite important games, because if Man United weren't to do well in those, and then I think the next 2 before the next international break in October, I think it's Spurs and Aston Villa. So yeah, it could either go okay and then all of a sudden Man United are fine, or it could go horribly wrong and everyone talking about them again back in October. But I just think for now, 3 games in the season, no real side is really not. Well, there have been sides who've not impressed, but I don't think it's the end of the world for any of these sides.
Oh no, it's such a short sample really to take from 3 games, and with this international break now, it's going to be very easy, I think, for teams to bounce back, and I think that's especially the case with United. As you said, it feels like that Liverpool game is one of those games where it's the start of a really bad run that then leads to a manager being sacked, or it's that final straw in a manager being sacked if it was placed slightly different in the season. So it needs a bounce back from United going into that Southampton and that Palace game. If they don't win both of those, there's going to be a lot of question marks, and especially if that poor form carries on into Tottenham and Villa. And it was a weird one, that Liverpool game, because they played awfully, and it was a big loss, 3-0 at home to, as you said, a massive rival. And to be honest, for me, I think one of the worst bits was that it was almost expected that they were going to lose that game 3-0, and it was almost expected that they weren't going to be able to put up much of a fight. And then it happened. We got the normal same reaction of United, and yeah, it just feels like it's been like this for a long while. So why should it have such a huge reaction, I guess, now, which says a lot about the club as a whole, as opposed to maybe how they're playing under Ten Hag right now at the moment.
Yeah, but I also think this season is an important one, because if you're Ineos, you decide to give Erik ten Hag a new season, and I think what he's going to be judged basically on the Premier League season, not going to be judged on the Carabao Cup, the FA Cup, or the Europa League. It's just going to be about the Premier League season. You finished 4th and you won the Carabao Cup, great. You came next season, you won the FA Cup, great, but you finished 8th, which is frankly unacceptable if you're Man United. So now this is the season. You got to show us what you got in the league, because if you don't do well in the league, then you won't be here at the end of the season, I think. And we can all say whether you're Ten Hag in, Ten Hag out, what do you think what he's good at, what he's not good at. But I think this will be the acid test. This will be where Erik ten Hag either proves that he is going to be the Manchester United manager going forward, or he's not. So I think either way, if Man United lose games, then it's okay, because now you know for certain he's not the man. Or if Man United do well, then everyone can go, okay, he is the man, so let's invest in him. So I think this season is important regardless of how it goes. At least it gives you confidence in whichever direction that you were to go in the future.
Yeah, which I guess is almost in a strange way a win-win. If Ten Hag has a good season, he'll stay on, he'll carry on. I think the feeling around him and the club will be vastly improved. And then if not, it's maybe answered some of those questions of the recent years, like we said, where results like this aren't particularly unexpected anymore, and that they'll be able to fully sort of hopefully put behind that era if things don't change this season.
Yeah, whatever happens, don't worry, because we will here to cover it all for you on the Football Fellowship podcast. That is it for this week's episode. Thank you very much for joining us during the international break. I know sometimes it's a bit hard when there's no football on, but we do appreciate your support. But join us next week as we're covering all the fixtures from Game Week 4 in the Premier League, and of course the big game, which is the North London derby. Fingers crossed for a good game in that one. If you're listening to us on Spotify, please give us 5 stars and tell your friends. And if you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, give us a like. It really does help us out, and we really do appreciate your support. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.